I want to say good evening or good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to Reverend Dr. James Thomas. Uh, I chose to stick up my hand for Black Lives Matter for personal reasons, because, like many of you, I too wanted to know more about Black Lives Matter, and so we're learning something new together. So today I reached out. Well, today we have our guest again, Reverend Dr. Thomas. He's a pastor of the Living Word Community Church, and lucky for us, he's also the co-founder of Clergy for Black Lives Matter. Lucky for us, meaning that most of us here are clergy and we are involved in religion, and so it would be good to hear how uh, clergy can impact or can be a part of Black Lives Matter. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Dr. Thomas, and I shared with him I was going to turn the floor over to him, and as we normally do, to give him the option to guide us in what in a direction that he sees fit in terms of his input in this topic. And we just want to follow along and be blessed by what he has to share with us. So at this time, Reverend Dr. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate just uh, meeting my dear brother Lynch, and we've had numerous conversations, and I'm excited to be here. Um, so I'm just going to, as I explained to him, I don't mince words. I just come straight forward, and so I'm going to give you the truth. And I think that that is important. And so I wanted to kind of start off with um, a couple of slides. I'm not going to show the entire presentation, but I think it will tell the story as to why it's important for clergy to be involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think I should also say um, why I decided to get involved. Very, very simple. I knew that this was going to be a contemporary human rights movement. And I was afraid that it would be the first human rights movement or civil rights movement, however you want to, categorize it, where where the church was not involved. And so I continued to kind of reach out and talk to clergy about getting involved in some way with Black Lives Matter. And then the Lord said, okay, aren't you a pastor? Why don't you just get involved? And so I had heard quite a bit about Black Lives Matter. When I started getting involved, I found that none of it was true in terms of their reluctance to engage clergy or the church, uh, that they were anti-church, that they were terrorists, and just a whole list of other things had been said. And I found, and what I have found in my involvement with Black Lives Matter, and if you are clergy, then you understand what I mean when I say this. I've honestly never had people treat me any better, not even in the church. And so, so I took note of that, and so I decided to see what I can do. And this was a presentation that I made to the National Association of Black Studies Conference, and so I want to show you just a little bit about that. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this works. So are you able to see my screen? You're able to see it, correct? Okay, good.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
so the only thing that is, so it's Sankofa Christianity, a framework for Black liberation, the dilemma for white evangelicals. Now, the only thing that I would exclude from this slide is California State University. We are currently in what we call we have decided that we would not promote Cal State LA, and that we would not allow them to promote any of our work. because of the anti-blackness that exists on our campus. But that's a whole nother issue. But I didn't get a chance to edit the slide, but I did want to make that point, is that we are in a struggle with Cal State LA with regards to the way in which they continue to promote anti-blackness on campus. And so I start with this slide because this is really what it's all about. That's my mother. That was at her 92nd birthday. And that is important because that continues to keep me grounded. She was a sharecropper's daughter, and her husband was my dad, of course. My dad, his grandfather was lynched. And so she escaped the sharecropper's farm. They had to leave in the cover of night because they threatened to kill her because she refused to allow them to take her prize pig. So she escaped with a prize pig. And so even in the onset, she has taught us to be people who would resist. That's how she's raised us. So I just keep that in the forefront of my mind when I do this work. And I keep also my grandfather in the forefront of my mind when I do this work also, because it reminds me that, the issues of Jim Crow and white supremacy and the violence against Black people, it touches us in very real ways today. I never knew my grandfather because he was lynched for winning a new car in a raffle, and they said no nigga would drive a new car before me, and so they took his life. Now, I'm gonna pass up this slide. But this basically just shows how Christianity is spread across the globe. Now, this is a very important slide. Common misperception is directly the opposite. The intellectual leadership typically moves from north to south, from Europe to Africa. But in Christian history, contrary to the common assumption, the flow of intellectual leadership demonstrably moved from Africa to Europe. And this is a significant aspect of the work that we do in Clergy for Black Lives and why this is important for Black Lives Matter. Because again, Black Lives Matter is about saying that Black people matter and that, what we think and what we feel matters. There's one more slide, and this is this one, that I'm going to show you. And one of the things that is often said, particularly in, Black liberation groups, is that Christianity is a quote unquote white man's religion. And it's important to understand that the slaves never embraced the Western brand of Christianity. They never, ever, ever did. And as a matter of fact, the slaves believed that it was impossible for the white folks to be saved. This was their belief. As a matter of fact, one slave is quoted as saying, if I get to heaven and there are white people there, then I'm leaving because I know it ain't heaven. And that was a response to slave masters when they were sick and believing to be on their deathbed. They would call their slaves around them and they would repent to them. And so the slaves would say, no, we're sorry. That's not going to get it. That's just not going to get it. And so what this slide talks about is that prayer was resisted. And so many times I'm going to stop sharing now. And there are other slides that I could have shown, but those were the most important. But there were many times when there would be where the slave masters would decide that we're going to beat them if they pray. And so there was always this view that if you prayed, that you could be beaten. And so that is a very important aspect of the struggle of the Black church, the struggle of the Black preacher, the struggle of the Black faith, is that it has always been centered in this idea of resistance. And so when we look at Black Lives Matter. Um, what is Black Lives Matter really about? Um, I don't know if something is happening with it, but I'm only seeing one person. I don't know if that's okay.
So change your view screen up in the corner so you can see the gallery. So there's 21 of us.
Okay, that's much better. Okay,
Right.
okay, that's much better. So when you think about the work of Black Lives Matter, and the work is significant, and I want to be clear as to how Black Lives Matter was founded. Black Lives Matter was founded with students from Cal State LA, um, community members, and Pan-African Studies faculty from Cal State LA. So it was a movement that was started, and it wasn't even something that anyone even planned. When things happen in the Black community or things happen that impact the Black community, Black folks tend to converge on Leimert Park. I call it the last bastion of Black culture that's slowly slipping. We have to fight to remain. And so they just went down there to hold each other. And that's where it started. That's how it started. That's how it began. And it's grown since then. And so Black Lives Matter has never been a terrorist group. First of all, we're a bunch of professors and students, and we're not trying to go to jail and commit crimes. That's not what we do. We teach. That's what we do. And so we have come to realize, a couple of things. That number one, and I've said this again and again in Black Lives Matter, is that if we are to do this work, and I've been very, very clear, I don't want anybody negotiating my liberation and they don't know God. That's just it. You don't know God, you can't negotiate my. I mean, you can't. I'm sorry. You have to be willing to appeal to a higher power than yourself. And if you can't do that, then I can't trust you to negotiate liberation on my behalf. And so, and that's just my personal view. There are people who would disagree with that, but that is my view, and I stand by it. So when we started looking at what was happening, and it's important to be very, very clear. Before George Floyd, Black Lives Matter was, kind of the, when you walk in the grass and a dog and the dog owner didn't clean up the mess afterwards, and you walk in it. That's what Black Lives Matter. That's how Black Lives Matter was viewed before George Floyd. That's how it was viewed. It was they were not giving any coverage in the media. That was positive. It was a small. I mean, you've heard about the Jackie Lacey protest and what happened at her house, I'm sure. And yes, I was there. And the narrative that Jackie Lacey gave was absolutely a lie. And I can tell you about what really happened that day as well, if you're interested. But most times there were probably 30 people at the protest. I don't think Black Lives Matter has 100 members. And I'm being very liberal when I say that. So it's not this huge organization. However, its message resonates with people across the globe. And so the weapon of Black Lives Matter is the message, not the people. People are harmless. Many of them are professors. It's the message. And the message goes to the heart of the problem. And that is white supremacy, which means that white people are God, That's what that means. And that the police have a responsibility of upholding that ideology. And so, and we can talk about it in less, in kinder and gentler ways when we talk about white fragility and we talk about white privilege. But in fact, it is white supremacy. You don't get to the kind of violence that has been perpetrated against Black people for over 400 years unless you think you're God. And you know, one of the things that and so how do we get to that? How do we deal with that? And so we deal with that by saying that Black Lives Matter, and we deal with that by saying that the police need to be funded and abolished. That's how we get to that. And now we've come to realize that the police associations, i.e. so-called unions, are propping up the police and those who would kill unarmed Black and brown folks. And so what we do is we try to be very strategic in our work. We try to exercise our work with laser focus. We determine who our targets will be, and we continue our message until we win, and we win. And some of the things that we have won the complete removal of the police from the Los Angeles Unified School District. Why is that important? That is important because the literature says that the number of contacts that you have with police increases your chances of being arrested by the police. And so we don't want police running in and out of our schools. We just don't want that. And so in addition to that, we were able to stop the increase in police funding to the city and to divert almost $900 million back into programs that will help. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is all about poverty reduction. These are issues related to poverty. I mean, the impact of racism and white supremacy is an economic impact that that folks don't really take into consideration, even as we look at the trial. And I'm going to stop talking, and you all can ask me questions. But even as we look at the trial that's going on today, I am totally triggered by this trial. I am outraged by this trial, and I'm not outraged just because of what this officer did. Not just because of what this officer did. I'm outraged because once again, Black people are being traumatized. And this time it's children. And so even though George Floyd is an example of contemporary lynching, the impact of that lynching is reverberating around the world with Black and brown people through this trial. And it is children. You know, they have had children testify, children who saw this. Children, a 9-year-old testified watching a man murdered. And this isn't outrageous because after all, it's just Black people. It's just Black people. And this is before we even get to the verdict. Why did the manager send a kid out to confront 2 grown men about a counterfeit bill? Who does that? The manager carries a gun. Why would he do that? Because those young people needed a job to help support their family. His mother lived upstairs above the store. He had to do it. And they painted George Floyd as a monster when this young person was willing to take the hit for George Floyd. To just say, don't even worry about it. And he even said that he didn't even believe that George Floyd knew that it was a counterfeit bill. And so, I'm sorry, I got emotional.
Oh, me too.
This is the problem. And where is the church? And I'm talking about all churches. Where is the church? I've said this over and over. If I were God, I would shut us down too. Because what are we doing? We're not transforming the world. I don't know what we're doing. I really don't know what we're doing. If we can't see this, if this doesn't move us to act in ways that we are not accustomed to acting, we may as well have had our knee on the neck of George Floyd. And then there was a fire person there who could have saved his life. We watched this system of injustice attack her for simply trying to do her job when the police officer refused to do his. What kind of people are we? I laid this at the feet of the church. Because I don't know if there is a time when we've had more people declare and stick their chest out that we are Christians. It's ironic that this is happening during Holy Week. Our Savior was lynched in the same way. His death was to send a message. You continue to speak in the way that you do, and you too will die in the way that he did. But the leaders of the church, they were courageous and they prayed and they asked God to give them strength, and they refused, even to the point of death. The apostles were killed. That's kind of the payment for authentic Christianity. Not jets and cars and prestige and book deals and movie deals and shows. That's kind of the price, kind of the payoff. And so for me, Black Lives Matter, in my opinion, I've concluded that the reason that the church has such an issue with Black Lives Matter is because Black Lives Matter is doing the work that we refuse to do. I have been to more, I know I've been to 100 or more rallies, probably, I may be embellishing a bit, let's say 25 to 50, during the pandemic. During the pandemic, not that, and my brother-in-law died of COVID, my sister had COVID, my daughter had COVID, my nephew had COVID, members of my church, not arguing that people should go out, it's your own choice. But it should not be an excuse for not finding a way to make your voices heard. There is something that you can do. And that's the universal you, that's not you directly. And so it's very, very interesting. There's a journalist who's been out with us, I don't know how many times. And he said, you know, he came down with COVID. He said, all these protests and never once got COVID. But then I quarantine and then I get COVID. How do you get COVID when you're quarantined? Is what he was arguing. You know, and so I'm saying this to say, and I think I told Leo this. I am a church history buff in a sense. The last time the church was shut down, I believe it was in 1918. And if you know the story of the miracle of the dancing sun or Fatima, it was during the plague, the flu, whatever that flu was, and there was these three children who said that they had a vision of the Virgin Mary. So if you know the story, and they refused to say that they didn't have a conversation with the Virgin Mary with this premonition that they say they saw. And so at the end of the day, they called everybody out to this mountaintop, and this person that they saw was going to reveal themselves, and they asked him to work a miracle. Now there were people, thousands and thousands of people that came from all over the world to witness this, you know, either this miracle or this prank, whatever you want to call it. And one of the things that the three children said in terms of the church being shut down and in terms of the pandemic that was killing way more people than this one has killed, was that God was offended by the worship. He was offended by the worship. Now, this is what the children said. And of course, the people were upset. And they asked that a miracle, that this premonition would work, this miracle. And the people that were there and people across the world witnessed the sun dancing in the sky, thus the miracle of the dancing sun. Now, this is a real thing, y'all. This is a real thing. And at the end of the day, you know, and there's actually a movie called Fatima that is out that you can watch that kind of reenacts it. And then I think they talked to one of the children. I think she's a nun now. But I mean, you know, at the end of the day, if God is not offended by our worship today in 2021, I don't know when he could ever be, because this is a complete mess. You know, this is a complete, I mean, you know, and we all have to, I mean, I would love to say it's just the white evangelicals. I love to say that, but I know it's not. It's a good talking point, but I know it's not. It's all of us. All of us have been complicit in allowing what I call foolishness to continue in the name of God. And now we're here at a time when we need God the most. And so I'm going to end there. And for any questions that you all may have about Black Lives Matter or anything that I've said, but these are the kinds of discussions that we are able to have in Black Lives Matter.
Dr. Thomas, I want to be the first one to say how wonderful you are. Thank you so much for your words. I remember when you first signed on to do this presentation, you wrote in your email, "I don't mince words." And I was the one that said, "Bring it on," because we need to hear it unminced.
Right.
So thank you for your candor. And I took a lot of notes here. I'm going to let everybody else talk in a minute. But what struck me was this, how you began your presentation, Black mothers as the foundation. That is a particular topic of interest for me, that Black women have been this foundation for the Black community. I grew up in Leimert Park, this flashpoint area you talked about the weapon is the message, that demystifies this whole idea of being some kind of rebel group, and it's the message, not the people. Congratulations on reducing the police presence at LA Unified School District and redirecting programming funds. Your point that was most striking was it's just Black people as the basis for having the children doing this work. And so there's one question here. There's been this idea of defunding versus abolishing police. I was in a seminar with another of your colleagues at Black Lives Matter, and she explained to me the difference between defunding and abolishing. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, well, I'll be very, very honest. We say defunding and not abolishing because people are afraid of that. They're afraid of defunding. They're horrified at the thought of abolishing. And one of the things that's important to understand is that policing came out of slave catching. And if you understand that, then you understand what happens to Black people. You know, one of the things that scene in front of George Floyd showed, it revealed, it was a modern day, you know, kind of, we caught this slave, and even though there are people who can overwhelm us, they're not going to. They're not going to. And so even though we have all of this going on, they're not going to, because we've trained them well. We've trained them not to. And so when we talk about defunding, it's really divest and invest. You know, we want, because at the end of the day, it still comes down to poverty. It's still, I mean, George Floyd had a counterfeit $20 bill. Why? Because he didn't have $20. I mean, it's really simple, you know. It's really simple. You know, I don't think a millionaire would be someplace past. Well, no, they probably do, but they could get away with it. But my point is, you know, so this whole idea of abolishing it, we know what policing really is. And just as we did not seek to reform the institution of enslavement, we didn't seek to make it kinder and gentler. We didn't want nicer slave masters. We sought to abolish it because we understood what it was. Now, I approach this idea of abolishing the Los Angeles Police Department, particularly because I was also involved in the 1992 civil unrest and in recommending and helping to usher in the reforms around the civil unrest. They were the toughest reforms in the history of any city. But in 2021, we're right back where we started. And so reform doesn't work. It absolutely does not work. And what reform ends up doing is it ends up adding training. So the money that we take away from the police, it comes back as training dollars to implement the reforms, right? So they don't lose any money. They don't lose any money. And we all know that they get great training in the academy. But the problem is as soon as they finish the academy and they get with their partner, the first thing their partner says is, forget all that stuff you learned at the academy. Let me teach you how to survive on these streets. That's what happens. So I hope that answers, yeah.
Open it up to any other questions, comments. This
How
is
would
not a shy group. What's going on?
how could a person join Black Lives Matter
Oh,
or Clergy for Lives Matter?
That's a great question. So there's two organizations, but they're kind of linked. Clergy for Black Lives is for clergy, and it's clergy from all, you know, all faith traditions. So it's very ecumenical. Black Lives Matter, you can only join Black Lives Matter if you are Black. So if you are Black, you can become a member of Black Lives Matter. If you are Afro-Latina, you can become a member of Black Lives Matter. However, there are white people for Black lives. There are Asian Pacific people for Black lives. So there's all these other groups that all meet we all kind of coalesced, but they have their separate work because there's a way that white folks can talk to white folks, and there's a way that, Latinx folks can talk to Latinx folks, and and so we acknowledge that, and so and so even though you can't be quote unquote a member of Black Lives Matter, you are involved in the work of Black Lives Matter. And what makes this different from, I think, the civil rights movement of the 60s is that there are a lot of people who are not Black. And you've seen these, they are not Black. A lot of them, they're not Black. But they push Black folks to the front, and they demand that Black folks set the agenda. So all that stuff about Soros and all that, I don't know if you've heard like all this different stuff about who's controlling Black Lives Matter. Well, you're looking at who's controlling Black Lives Matter. It's a core group of people. And so, and it works well. I wish I could pull up a picture of my security. When I speak, I have security often. And my security is, it's like a atomic bomb. Nobody would dare mess with me. Well, my security is a white woman. It's a white woman. I ain't concerned about nothing. And so, and that's very deliberate. There was one time, and I'll tell you this story really quickly. There was a time when we were organizing a protest, and it was Clergy for Black Lives. It was really our first kind of protest as Clergy for Black Lives. And so we were shutting down, I think, Spring Boulevard, First and Spring. And we were gonna have a big rally. We had a big flatbed truck. We had speakers, we had the whole 9 yards, and the police, 50 cars. Police and sheriffs. I'm like, I didn't know y'all worked together, but police and sheriffs came, and they were about to arrest us. And so one of the members of Clergy, another pastor, Pastor Q, got on the mic and said, we need all of our white clergy to use your white privilege to stop these folks from arresting us. And do you know, those folks walked around the back of that flatbed truck and stood in front of those police and dared the police to move forward. And do you know that those 50 plus cars, I don't know, 100 police or more in riot gear, turned around and left? And we tied up that intersection for about 4 more hours. That's the power of what we do. And often there are white allies from, white people for Black lives who will even surround us so that the police can't get to us. And the police, get this, they end up charging them with lynching. Can you believe that? So all of the lynching cases over the last few years are either white people, are the Black people, or I think they have one with, Jamie, who stopped them from beating one of our elderly activists. Charge them with lynching. Because lynching is taking someone out of the custody of the police. Wow. That's not what they did, but
Wow, one of our participants wrote in the comments that she was one of the white clergy there, Marsha Hawkins.
So you remember that, huh?
Yeah.
It was, and this is the thing. This is the church that people want to see. This is the church, you know, and I've always argued, if there were ever going to be an end to racism and discrimination and poverty, it's going to take the church. I've always believed that. But as my mother would say, we got to get right first. Get right, church.
And for
So
that,
any other
Dr. Thomas, I really want to thank you for bringing the church into this conversation, and also the power of protest prayer, because I think it shakes us, the white church, if I could call it that way. Many of our congregations are predominantly white folks. It shakes us from our slumber, because that's what we need, right? If you read the book of the Psalms, those are protest prayers and protest songs, well, many of them. And we in our churches need to become more like that, and not only pray for, you know, our own little preservation of our own little privileged world.
Absolutely. And I think what we realize is that, you know, eventually it comes our way. You know, eventually, you know, Daniel Goleman in his book, Emotional Intelligence, he talks about how if we would only deal with issues when Black people face them, because Black people face these issues 10 years before everybody else. And if we solve them with Black folks, they would never get to everybody else. And so that is, you know, but that's not, but if we have this idea that Black people in some way are not like us, that they're different from us, you know, and that's a very, very, you know, that's very, very significant, you know, and I will say too that, you know, we can bear some blame for that as Black folks, because we have to walk around like supermen and superwomen. That we just have to. It's a survival technique. And so sometimes, you know, we present as if nothing can bother us, and we know that a lot of things bother us, but we don't have the liberty of being able to deal with it. So we just keep moving. You know, and sometimes that comes off as if, you know, we have this resiliency that cannot be impacted.
W. Kamau Bell commented on the one of the people testifying yesterday, the young man who made the 911 call. And the defense attorney was trying to characterize him as being an angry Black man. And I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but he did a great job of diffusing that. And another commentator talked about how Black people aren't given the liberty of the full range of their emotions. Yes, he was angry and indignant at this display of violence, but to comment on it portrayed the witness as being irrational or unreasonable. So that's to your point about we can't have our full range of emotions without being characterized as something.
I mean, absolutely. That just happened to me, you know, recently at Cal State. I was accused of attacking someone, and I just laughed about it. Other people were offended by it, but I just laughed about it. It's the funniest thing in the world. I'm like, me attacking somebody, you know, but it was because of what I said. And what I said is that they're hypocrites. Well, I believe that. That's what I believe. And you know, but it's also important to note, and white folks on here, I want y'all to listen up and listen up real good on this one. Listen up real good on this one. Stop believing that Black people who speak nicely and kindly and gently to you have the answers to solving this issue. They don't. Start embracing the people who will jump on the top of the table and scream and yell and cuss you out if necessary, because they have their finger on the pulse of what it feels like as the typical Black person. And it cannot be business as usual. And what happens is that, there are so many diversity and inclusion jobs available now. It's ridiculous. Everywhere you look, everybody's hiring a diversity and inclusion person. But what they're really hiring is what I call the dissent whisperer. Now y'all get ready to get mad at me because I'm getting ready to just tell y'all. And chief among the dissent whisperers is our former Black president, Barack Obama. Every time there is dissent, there's always the ability to call for a Black person. Now y'all calm down. Now come on, let's talk about this now. Now you know that's not the way you handle that. Now you know you should not have lost your cool. Now you have made us all look bad. Now come on. That's not the way we do, and Martin Luther King was very clear. Justice delayed is justice denied. He talked about the white liberal. He said, that's our enemy. And so at the end of the day, we need to start saying, no, I don't want to talk to people who are going to, sit down with me and discuss theory and not going to get emotional, not going to get upset, not going to raise their voice, not going to exercise their humanity. I want to talk to the folks who are yelling and screaming in the street. That's what, because if we're going to solve this problem, those are the people that we need to appeal to, not to the people that are comfortable sitting behind their desk.
Go ahead.
And that is something that you wonderful white folks can begin to implement in your life. Say, wait, brother, sister, let me just ask you something. You've been out on the picket line. As a matter of fact, you might want to use Black Lives Matter as your litmus test. What you feel about Black Lives Matter? Oh no, they're a terrorist organization. Then you just put a check by their name, and right next to the name, dissent whisperer. Because even if I don't agree with anything that they're saying, if I silence them, who does it help? It helps white supremacy and police. Anyway, you were going to say something, Cheryl. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. One of my favorite, dearest friends who happens to be on this call has an expression that I think addresses this dissent whisperer concept. And she said, even Jesus was indignant in the marketplace.
Absolutely. Think about it. He's whooping people and throwing them out of somebody else's church. Now, you know you don't do that. It wasn't even his church. And it's true. And because people only act that way when they're not being heard. People only organize when they're not being heard. So when folks start organizing, it's because nobody's listening.
So thank you, Pastor Thomas. We got about 7 more minutes. And I want to...
I didn't tell you how you can become a member of Black Lives Matter. You can become a member of Clergy for Black Lives. All you have to do is tell me that you're interested, and I'll send you the link to our meetings. Black Lives Matter. And also, too, if you attend, even if you can attend the Black Lives Matter meetings. And so what will happen at the meetings, if you say you want to join Black Lives Matter, they will put you in with White People for Black Lives. It's kind of confusing unless you see it yourself. It's all Black Lives Matter, but it's segmented off based on race and ethnicity. That is, that's kind of the ethnic studies way, but you're still kind of a part of it, but you're working on your own, within your own group. And so in order to be a member of Black Lives Matter, all you got to do is attend 3 meetings. We have a meeting a month, and we've actually been having them online. And you can go to the Black Lives Matter Facebook page. You can go to my Facebook page. I usually post the meetings. And so you'll have an opportunity to hear what happens at a Black Lives Matter meeting. This is not a mystery. And it's kind of like this. So I just wanted to say that. So that's 3 meetings for Black Lives Matter. If you want to participate in Clergy for Black Lives, let Brother Lynch know, and I'll make sure that he gets the information to you all. Oh, what if you don't have Facebook? Get Facebook. It's easy. It's actually for Facebook. The young people say it's for old people. So that's what they say. They say we need Instagram and Twitter and all these other things.
I'd like to try to frame a question. That is, I'm expecting that at the end of this trial there will be an opportunity for rage. I'm not really afraid of that. I think it will come and it will need to happen. Last year there were a lot of people on the streets. They haven't been on the streets lately. I'm wondering the main question is what's happening right now and what is going to be happening soon? What is Black Lives working on while the people are not in the streets? What is continuing to happen?
Well, we are still in the streets every Wednesday. Every Wednesday we are organizing because now our focus is the police associations. So we want to get them kicked out of the federation. Is what we want. And so every Wednesday at 3:00 we do a rally in front of the Police Association building, which is across the street from ACLU. So that's every Wednesday at 3:00 is what we're doing. I do want to bring something up that is important. As we move, since Donald Trump, we all know that hate has increased. And now we can't just be concerned about police violence, but also random violence by random people who hate. And so there was a case that happened a few days ago in St. Louis where it was alleged that this couple was fighting, and this white gentleman comes out of his house with a assault weapon. And you can hear him saying, Craig, walk away, or whatever, leave her alone. Now you can clearly see from the videotape that Craig is walking away, that Craig is not messing with anybody. And so finally, Craig says something to him, uses some, foul language against him, like man, F you, or whatever it was. And the guy comes around the car, leans the gun on the car, and begins to shoot and kill Craig. The police come. I mean, it's the most gruesome thing. I mean, I've seen a lot of these, but this one is just another. So the police come, and guess what they don't do? They don't arrest the guy. But as a result of the video that was given to the district attorney, he has now been arrested for murder. So think about that. He murdered someone in cold blood. Again, nobody out there but Black people, so who cares? But they had a video. And the issue is, why do you have to have a video? What is it about our word that folks just don't trust? You know, and that's the irony of it. The irony of seeing these people on the stand and giving this heart-wrenching testimony. We've seen this movie before. I'm not even praying that they convict the guy. I'm done doing that. I've been hurt too many times when they have not. What I'm trying to do is figure out, what do we do if they don't? What do we do if they don't? And the only thing that popped in my head is that Black folks just should go on strike. They shouldn't go anywhere, buy anything, do nothing. They should bring this country to its knees. That's just, you know, I don't know if we will, because there's a lot of dissent whisperers out there. So that's just my knee-jerk response. You know, but something needs to happen.
This has been absolutely amazing. Leo, do you want to do our close?
Yes, I'll do our close. We reached that time, unfortunately. Uh, Many thanks to you, Pastor Thomas, for sharing your experience on the front line, and that is something that I needed to hear, and we need to hear, and I think all of us have found a place that we can place our interest and our care toward equality for all. And again, thank you for the great work that you do. And I want to say thank you. Each one of you are on the Zoom window with me. Thank you for the great work that you do. And we all have a piece that we can do, and it's not the same. And we get to consult God again to ask, what is it, God, that you would have us or have me to do? And based on that, you and I, we need to move forward. But I'm grateful for Brother Thomas and for Black Lives Matter and for what and the work that they do. So let us look to the Lord for a moment of silent prayer. Holy God, we thank you for the work that you've inspired us to do. We ask for your courage. We ask that you help us to know in our hearts and in our head that our calling is not easy. And hence, we're in Easter week. And we know what happens to our Christ, our Messiah. But we also know that on Sunday, it was a different story. So we thank you for the work that you've laid at our feet. We pray your strength that as we move toward Sunday, hear our prayer.
Yeah.
Go in peace to love and to serve.
Amen.
Amen. And
Thank you all. Thank you all for having me, and also too.
You're wonderful.
Since you all have, thank you. Since you all have recorded this, I would like to send this to Black Lives Matter and Clergy for Black Lives for them to view it, if you all don't mind. If you can send it to me. So if you,
Yeah,
that would
we
be
will
great.
do that. And thank you, Dr. Thomas. Thank you, Leo, for organizing this. You know, communicating with Dr. Thomas and Cheryl. Our group will meet again next week, Wednesday, same time, same place. I guess there will be a lot of reflections throughout the week in our own lives, so that we can come back next week, Wednesday, and more, you know, invigorated and more fired up for the work that is ahead of us. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to end the call, and blessings on you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.